Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, class 8 students. I am your biology teacher, Afsha Khalid. Class, we are again in lockdown condition, but Alhamdulillah, you have completed your syllabus and given the papers, whereas few papers are left, or inshallah ta'ala, if the school will open at the time, then you have to give these papers and we have to start our work, inshallah ta'ala. But for these days, we have to continue our work like before, then give your explanation and the PDF. So please, you will continue your work. Now, we have to start chapter number 3. Section is biodiversity. Bio means life and diversity means variety of organisms. It means we have to study the life of living organisms. Whereas class, around 2 million types of organisms exist on the earth today. Much more have gone extinct. Many more are yet to be discovered. 200 years ago, biologists divided all the organisms into 2 kingdoms as either plants or animals. But closer examination with better techniques include 3 more kingdoms. So class, बेटा मैं आप लोगों को according to chapter के topics जो हैं उनके हिसाब से ये explain भी करूँगी और साथ साथ ये written work you have to write in your copies. तो जिस तरीके से काम मैं आपको कराऊँगी उसी तरीके से ये explanation आपको दी जाएगी, ठीक है? Now class, we are starting chapter number 3, classification of living organisms. Classification enable biologists to study and identify various organisms more easily. Now, the scientific study which deals with the classification of living organisms is called taxonomy. What is taxonomy? In a broader sense, taxonomy can be defined as a branch of bio which deals with the description, identification, classification, and naming of living organisms according to structural similarities and dissimilarities. यानी कि अगर हम किसी भी लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म, भले से वो प्लांट हो या एनिमल हो, उसको हम किस तरीके से डिस्क्राइब करते हैं, हाउ वी आइडेंटिफाई दैट ऑर्गेनिजम्स और उसकी क्लासिफिकेशन क्या है, इन सब चीज़ों को देखते हुए इस लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म को नाम देना होता है या कोई उसकी क्लास दी जाती है अकॉर्डिंग टू देयर स्ट्रक्चरल सिमिलैरिटीज़ और डिससिमिलैरिटीज़ के ये ऑर्गेनिजम्स, हाउ मैनी ऑर्गेनिजम्स आर सेम इन स्ट्रक्चर और हाउ मैनी आर not same. So this branch is called taxonomy. Now, What is the basis of classification? All the living organisms placed in a particular group have many fundamental similarities in their structures. Sometimes it is impossible to classify organisms using morphological criteria, so one may compare the chemical substances which they contain. Other characteristics used in classifying organisms include cytological structures with the help of electron microscope, genetic constitution and their developmental pattern. यानी कि बेटे जिस वक्त हम किसी भी लिविंग ऑर्गेनिजम्स को किसी एक ग्रुप में रखते हैं तो हम उनकी फंडामेंटल सिमिलैरिटीज़ किस तरह देखते हैं? सबसे पहले हम ये देखते हैं कि मॉर्फोलॉजिकल हाउ मैनी ऑर्गेनिजम्स आर द सेम. लेकिन कभी कभी ऐसा होता है कि हम मॉर्फोलॉजिकली सारे ऑर्गेनिजम्स को एक ग्रुप में नहीं डाल सकते, तो इसके लिए हम केमिकली इन सब्सटेंस को देखते हैं कि हाउ मैनी chemicals are the same in few organisms, just like bacteria, which may look alike and have an identical cellular structure. इसके अलावा अदर कैरेक्टरिस्टिक जो हम यूज़ करेंगे वो है साइटोलॉजिकल स्ट्रक्चर, दैट इज़ स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ सेल. We have to see under the electron microscope, and the other thing is genetic constitution and their developmental patterns, कि how genetically they are combined with each other. Now we have to divide them in different units. The basic unit of biological classification is the species. A species is a group of organisms which have numerous physical features in common and which are normally capable of interbreeding and producing fertile offspring. यानी कि बेटे स्पीशीज़ जो है वो बायोलॉजिकल क्लासिफिकेशन की मेन यूनिट है, और ये स्पीशीज़ क्या होती है कि ऑर्गेनिजम्स जो होते हैं किसी ग्रुप के वो फिज़िकली कॉमन होते हैं, इनके फिज़िकल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स, और इनके अंदर नॉर्मली दे आर केपेबल ऑफ इंटरब्रीडिंग, दे कैन प्रोड्यूस द ऑफस्प्रिंग्स. सो इसके बाद जब ये क्लोजली रिलेटेड स्पीशीज़ को ग्रुप किया जाता है तो ये कहलाता है जेनरा, और सिमिलर जेनरा आर ग्रुप टुगेदर, दे आर कॉल्ड फैमिलीज़, एंड फैमिलीज़ इनटू ऑर्डर्स, ऑर्डर्स इनटू क्लासेस, क्लासेस इनटू फाइला, और डिवीजन एंड फाइला और डिवीजन इनटू किंगडम्स. Carolus Linnaeus adopted the binomial nomenclature system for naming organisms to eliminate confusion while using native or common name. When describing an organism, he gave each species a scientific name comprising 2 words. This is known as binomial nomenclature. The name refers to the genus and is called generic name and always begins with a capital letter. The species name follows the generic name and begins with a small letter. For example, scientific name for mustard is Brassica campestris, for frog Rana tigrina, and for human is Homo sapiens. Now class, you have to write the common scientific names and classification of mustard, man, and frog from the book. Previously, living things were classified into two kingdoms, namely plant kingdom and animal kingdom. The basis of this division was presence or absence of cell wall and chlorophyll. All the living organisms having cell wall and chlorophyll were regarded as plants and placed and studied under kingdom Plantae. All those living organisms having neither cell wall nor chlorophyll were regarded as animals and placed and studied under kingdom Animalia. But a large number of living organisms did not fit into this category of plants and animals. To solve this problem, Robert Whittaker suggested a new system of classifying living organisms. According to this new system, there are 5 kingdoms of living organisms. Number 1, Kingdom Monera, having prokaryotes which feed by a variety of methods. Number 2, Kingdom Protista, having unicellular eukaryotes which feed by a variety of methods. Kingdom Fungi, multicellular eukaryotes which heterotrophically by absorption. Kingdom Plantae, multicellular eukaryotes which feed photosynthetically. Kingdom Animalia, these are multicellular eukaryotes which feed heterotrophically by ingestion. Although Robert H. Whittaker's scheme received widespread approval, but it had one major drawback. It relates to the Protista kingdom, which contained all unicellular organisms, including those that formerly had been regarded as animal and those that had been regarded as plant. Other problem was that it meant putting algae into two separate kingdoms, the Protista and plant kingdom. The two American biologists, Margulis and Schwartz, brought forward a modification of Whittaker's scheme. According to this, there are 5 kingdoms of living organisms that are: number 1, Kingdom Prokaryote. It includes almost all the prokaryotes. For example, bacteria and cyanobacteria. Number 2, Kingdom Protoctista. It includes all the eukaryotic organisms which are no longer classified as animals, plant or fungi. For example, Euglena, Paramecium, Calamidomonas, etc. Kingdom Fungi. It includes non-chlorophyllous, multicellular and eukaryotic organisms having cell wall and cenocytic body called mycelium. For example, mushroom or agaricus. Kingdom Plantae. It includes the chlorophyllous, multicellular and eukaryotic organisms having cell wall and zygote developing into embryo. Examples are apple and sunflower, etc. The last kingdom is Kingdom Animalia. It includes non-chlorophyllous, multicellular and eukaryotic organisms having no cell wall. Examples are hydra, earthworm, man, etc. So, class, write these two classification and learn them. Now, class, the last question in your exercise is, on which basis organisms are classified? Organisms are classified into various units or classification on the basis of number 1, habitat, number 2, similarities, number 3, differences in structural features of plant and animals. Students, in your exercise 2 questions are left. Number 1, fill in the blanks, and number 2, encircle the correct answers. So please, you have to write from the book.